Jaykumar sir?
Yes.
Sir, good morning. Sir, there is a small message to the audience.
Okay. Yeah.
So, good morning all, please listen. Today we have a afternoon session which starts at 2:30 p.m. and there will be a test which contains 30 questions for 30 marks. So that test is mandatory to get a certificate. And from 3 p.m. onwards, we'll have valedictory and feedback session. Thank you. Lindu ma'am?
So we can start, right?
Yeah, we'll start, ma'am.
Only 44, or should we wait?
Yeah,
Little
50
more?
people are there, and some more people they will join within 2 minutes. So number will be
Okay, so
increasing gradually, no problem.
we'll wait 1 more minute.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so sir, we'll wait 1 more minute. We are expecting some more participants.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, 1 more. So good morning all. Welcome to the last day of 5-day online FTP MSFNS 2020. With immense pleasure, I would like to invite today's speaker, Professor Jayakumar MG. He is currently working as Associate Professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering, NIT Calicut. So Jayakumar sir is the senior most professor in our department in the area of VLSI and semiconductor devices. Professor Jayakumar has received his postgraduate degree in electrical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras in 2004. And he is currently in the final stage of his doctoral studies in the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, under the guidance of Dr. Sripat Karmalkar sir. So he has got more than 20 years of teaching experience and has taken several administrative positions in NIT Calicut like PG coordinator, beta coordinator, etc., to name a few. His interested area is modeling and simulation of semiconductor devices. So we are pleased to have with you, sir, and over to you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Today is the last day of this online FDP. And of course, all the audience, everybody were in the comfort zone of nanoscale devices and all. I don't know how this modeling of power semiconductor will fit into that broad title of that. So that is why I requested the coordinators to put this as the last session. Okay. So I hope at least you will gain a few things from this. Okay. Lindu, shall I present?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Just a second. I will. So is it visible? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Slideshow mode you can.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, visible.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Jaykumar MG, Associate Professor, Electronics and Communication Engineering Department, NIT Kozhikode. See, today I am going to talk about semiconductor power devices. Basically, at least that semiconductor devices will connect to whatever discipline or whatever thing you expect. Because as I told you, to interconnect this nanoscale devices and power devices, there is a slight mismatch. Okay, anyway, we will see. Okay, to begin any talk or anything, sometimes we need some motivation or something like this. Is one thing which I found during when I was preparing these slides, because I went to that website which is shown on the slide. Okay, just a second. I will turn on the laser pointer. So this was a website. I thought that okay, even though we are not interested in history anymore, like we do in the past, but at least some historical perspective of anything is good for better understanding. So I went to this website. Then I found this their motivational sentence of that particular day. This: I have not failed, but found 1,000 ways to not to make a light bulb. Maybe I don't know whether he has said or not. Okay, at least it will give some motivation. Okay, now going into the subject. Okay, for everything, anything what we talk about, we want a technical definition. Oh, this was the definition which I found on that particular website. You can read it. So it's visible for everybody, no? I hope.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a technical definition they have given. So they are saying that it is of great importance to the world around us and it has been important to us for a long time. Okay, that is the motivation behind we are looking into it. We will see shortly how it is. So before that, a few historical aspects. So you can read it through. There is no meaning in I am reading everything. So the first bullet says that it has started in the technology, the power electronics emerged as a separate engineering branch or at least a part of the branch in early 1900s. So those vacuum tube era devices like a triode, vacuum tube rectifier, and there was something called a metal tank rectifier, ignitron, etc. in 1930s, 40s, etc. And all these devices were there for controlling energy up to 1950s. So it's the same website. Now they are saying that there was a first electronic revolution in 1948. We all know. What was that? The silicon transistor at Bell Laboratories that Shockley, Bardeen, Brattain, etc. Then maybe after 6 years, another device emerged. It was a thyristor. As it said, a name given to, hello? Any semiconductor? Yeah, anything? Anything? Anybody wants to say anything? Hello?
No, sir, nothing. You can proceed.
Yeah. So the another device after 6 years of this invention of this transistor, it was a thyristor. That was a semiconductor switch, and it required PNPN, regenerative feedback for energy control, and that was also used, and still they are used. Then they are telling about a unijunction transistor. All these are historical importance only. Most of the applications of these are outdated now from the same website. Now they are saying that there was a second electronic revolution in 1958. That is the GE company has developed a commercial thyristor. Now subsequently, there were power semiconductor counterpart for our bipolar junction transistor, then coming to MOSFET. The major disadvantage of this thyristor type devices was that to turn on it, we can apply a gate pulse, but to turn off that device, you have to reverse bias it. That the control of that was taking that device to off state was difficult. That was the disadvantage of that. Then maybe we know that nowadays we all of us are telling that MOSFET is having so many advantages over BJT. That is why 90% of the market is now MOSFET, etc. So people thought of why to merge the advantages of MOSFET and BJT to invent a new device that was called the IGBT, insulated gate bipolar junction transistor. It is basically it is a power device. It is again merging the advantages of power bipolar junction transistor and a power MOSFET. Okay, and now in the beginning I told you why power electronics or power semiconductor devices are important for us. So this is a diagram reproduced from this text, B.J. Balika. So we can see that the applications, power domain applications are given as a function of voltage rating as well as current rating. So by this voltage rating, what we mean is that it is a breakdown voltage. So for any switch, what is the main application of this power semiconductor devices? For any power device, how it is used in electrical circuits? So I think I want to interact with anybody. Anybody can tell. In what way any power semiconductor device or any device, but how it is used in an electrical circuitry to control power?
Sir, the on the resistance.
Yeah, it can be used as a switch. Basically,
So
it is used. Hello?
On the resistance should be as low as possible. The on the resistance.
Pardon?
So the on the resistance should be as low as possible.
Yeah, on resistance should be as low as possible. Okay. So basically, meaning that it is used as a switch. It has an on state and an off state. In the on state, it will be carrying very huge amount of currents, maybe in amperes or tens of amperes. Okay. So that is the current rating of the device. How much current it carries in the on state. Now coming to the off state means reverse bias. Then that switch has to support very large amount of reverse bias across its terminals. That is the voltage rating. For any switch, there will be an on rating as well as off state voltage rating. So we can see that it is a logarithmic scale. It is the voltage rating is being increased rightwards. The current rating is increased upwards. But we can see that, for example, if you take a high voltage DC transmission, the current rating is very high, 10 power 4 amperes. Voltage rating is also very high. That switch has to handle very high voltage rating and current rating. So power rating also, naturally. But on the other side, we have power supplies, automotive, electronics, communication applications, where this voltage rating is in hundreds of volts and current rating in milliamperes or amperes, etc. Few amperes. Now we have another diagram reproduced from the same textbook. See here, those applications, all those applications, some new applications also are listed as a function of frequency, operating frequency on the x-axis, as well as power rating on the y-axis. That means the current rating as well as dissipation, power dissipation comes here. Here also we can see that that HVDC power distribution, the power rating is very high, but the operating frequency is low, a few hertz, tens of hertz. But we have applications like microwave oven or cellular communication or all those kind of applications where operating frequency involved is very high. At that time, that power rating is low because there is a trade-off. There is a trade-off between the operating frequency as well as power rating. As operating frequency increases, the power rating will reduce. Now, coming to the power semiconductor devices, we have found from the previous two diagrams that its current rating is important. It's a diagram from Wikipedia, representative diagram of various kind of semiconductor devices, power semiconductor devices. So there is a current rating which is important. There is an voltage rating which is important, and there is an operating frequency which is again important. So we have some sort of a three-dimensional representation here. Each of these oleums, cuboidal oleums, corresponds to those application domain. Now we see that, okay, if we talk about a MOSFET, power MOSFET, see there is a very small oleum here where power MOSFET can be used. That means, okay, obviously a high frequency device, it can carry currents up to 200 amperes, but its voltage rating is 1000 volt or less. 1000 volt or less. We assume that all these devices are made with silicon for the time being. All these devices are made with silicon. Now, coming to IGBT, what I have said, the merging power BJT and power MOSFET. We can again see that, okay, this is the operating speed, 1 kilohertz to 100 kilohertz. So its voltage rating is higher, 4 kV, 5 kV, like that. Again, current rating is also higher compared to MOSFET. Now these are GTO, thyristors, etc. The operating frequency reduces, but its voltage rating as well as current rating is more. Now onwards, we will concentrate to this MOSFET, power MOSFET. We can take all the devices, but our talk will be related to this power MOSFET, which will be restricted to power MOSFET. Now there is another diagram which gives the application domain in terms of a device as well as material point of view. Because in the previous slide I said that, okay, we will assume that all the devices are made of silicon. Now we will come to two more levels. These are silicon carbide, SiC, it's a compound semiconductor of the fourth group element, silicon and carbon. And it is gallium nitride, another compound. We can make power devices with these devices also. Nowadays, we are gradually replacing silicon devices or with these kind of power devices made of silicon carbide and gallium nitride, especially for high speed, high temperature, high power applications. So here BJT is also shown. BJT is occupying this niche. Tell anything?
There was one question posted in chat box, sir.
Chat box. Okay. Just a second. I will. Yeah. Here some questions. Switch controlled switch. Then Jessica Dave SN80. Generally in VLSI design, we give more importance to power density than to absolute wattage. Why do we consider absolute power in power semiconductor devices? Yeah, absolutely correct. Instead of power in VLSI design and small scale design, we are telling about the power density. Here also in power semiconductor device also the active area is very important. Actually, when we say about say when we come to parameters like own resistance, etc., we have to denote in terms of something like specific property, just like a power density, just like telling about power density. So, because size of the device is also important. But I think because we are more used to absolute wattage in power electronics, people may be quoting that more. Is there anything else? Okay. We will go to the next part of the talk. So is it visible in the slideshow mode?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I just want to take you to gradually to the power semiconductor specifications or that domain from the nanoscale domain which you were discussing till yesterday. So this is specifications of 7 nanometer FinFET technology. So this is the reference for that at the bottom of the slide. I will turn on the laser pointer. This is the reference. These are the dimensions involved. All are in nanometer. The specific dimensions are given here. The only thing which I am interested is in the power levels. The power levels they are handling is in microwatts only. Speaking about the powers of microwatts only. Then coming to a little bit higher specifications or MOSFETs, discrete MOSFET. It's the 2N7000 N-channel MOSFET. We can see that the maximum voltage involved here is 60 volt. VDS, maximum 60 volt. The maximum drain current in the on state is 200 milliampere. And this is a threshold voltage. At absolute maximum and minimum, there will be a typical threshold voltage of 8 volt. And the power levels are in milliwatts. It's like hundreds of milliwatts, 400 milliwatts they are telling typically if we take it. So another component specifications. Now the packaging is different. It's a discrete size. Now going to a still higher version, a device which can handle more amount of power. It's hundreds of watts. So VDS maximum is 200 volt now. ID max is 80 ampere. Then power dissipation is in watts, 125 watts. Now we can see that, okay, the device appearance is also different. The size is large, some grooves, some holes, etc. I hope all of you are knowing why this kind of things appears, because it generates a lot of heats. So we have to add heat sinks. To fix this device to heat sinks, we need this grooves and etc. This is again a silicon. All these devices are made of silicon only. Here. Now come to a different set of specifications. See here, with the device number, there is an SiC. Silicon carbide, not silicon. Because practically silicon devices are limited up to 300 volt, 400, maximum 600 volt if we use the super junction technology and all. Above that, silicon power MOSFET will not work very well. So we are switching over to a different material, compound semiconductor material. Actually, the silicon carbide is a wide bandgap material compared to silicon. Compared to silicon carbide, silicon we will say it is a narrow bandgap material. Silicon it is 1.1 eV, we know. Silicon carbide it is 3.2 electron volt. Actually, a large number of crystallographic forms are there for silicon carbide. One of the crystallographic form called polytype used for power applications is 4HSIC, 4 hexagonal. The crystallographic arrangement is hexagonal. That is why it is called a 4HSIC. For that, its band gap is 3.26 eV. Okay. What is the advantage of this large band gap? Can anybody tell? Why we are going for a very large band gap when we want to have very high voltage withstanding capability or anything? Why we are going for a wide band gap material compared to silicon?
So we will have higher cutoff frequency.
Higher cutoff frequency. How I don't know how to relate this frequency and energy band gap. Can you be a little bit more specific?
Not that much, sir.
Pardon?
Not that much, sir. No much idea.
Not much idea. So basically, what I have seen from literature is that it is the leakage current. Leakage current. The band gap is small. Forbidden gap is small. As temperature increases, leakage current increases. So that will lead to breakdown easily. The device will break down at a lower voltage. But if band gap is higher, the leakage current will be lower. So it will reach that breakdown region at a little bit higher voltage or a more higher voltage. So that is why silicon carbide and all we can use for high voltage devices. So here the VDS maximum is 1200 volt, whereas the maximum VDS for typical VDS for silicon is 600 volt. And obviously VGS, there will be a typical VGS threshold voltage 2 to 4 volt. So again, it is a power device. It can carry 36 ampere current in the on state. And there is power density, maximum power density. That is not power density, it's absolute power. around it 192 watts. That's the specification they have given. So in every slide, I am giving the reference, so you can easily locate if you are interested. Now, after seeing all these things, we have started from a 7 nanometer FinFET technology, and we came to a silicon carbide power MOSFET. So what makes the difference between a power device and a small signal device or a nanoscale device? It is something like dimensions or packaging or use of heat sinks or a combination of these factors which comes to our mind. That is the point first we will look on. Obviously, there is a larger dimension, a large size, package, heat sinks, everything is involved. So for that, we will take a typical power MOSFET specification and see how can we implement it using a small signal device, that is small signal MOSFET. Can we implement this set of specifications? Say 1200 volt, breakdown voltage should be 1200 volt. Maximum we have to apply that in the reverse bias. It has to carry 60 amperes. And threshold voltage obviously we will set for a small signal device. So these two specifications can we meet this with a typical small signal device, maybe one like this. This diagram I have taken from Yanis Sividis. Can we meet these specifications with this device? Obviously, the answer is no. Then why? So we will try to answer that. So these are the specifications, whatever I have shown in blue. These are the specifications for a typical small signal MOSFET. So it will have a small size. Say channel length may be 0.5 micrometer. Then we can assume a W by L ratio of 5. Now average surface mobility of maybe 500 centimeters square per volts per second. And an oxide thickness of 4 nanometer. Now assume that there is an overdrive voltage of 3 volt. Let we will assume a linear region operation, say 0.3 volt. What is the current? Suppose this device is having these set of specifications. What is the current? Say we can use the simplest model, square law model. Can anybody quickly calculate it? How much current these specifications will generate using the square law model? So I have done a calculation. I found that the current is around 1.9 milliampere. This is the current which can be generated using this device, but we need a drain current of 60 ampere at room temperature. And obviously we cannot, what we can change? Which parameter we can change? Mobility we cannot change. Say oxide capacitance, how we will change. All these are process limited, so we cannot change much. Voltages, overdrive voltage, how much we will change, because typical threshold voltage etc. is 1 volt, 2 volt, or maybe less than that. So we cannot change much. There is no room for change. The VDS also, to ensure linear region operation, we cannot change. Then the parameters which are available, what is available is W by L. This L, normally it's a technology, again technology limited parameter. We cannot reduce L much. For typical power devices, etc., L is 0.5 micrometer. Then what should be the W by L ratio required to realize this much current, 60 amp? So my calculation yielded this value of W by L ratio, 1.58 into 10 power 5. See how huge the device is. If you want to realize these specifications with a small signal MOSFET, we need a W very high, very large in centimeters. So in the on state, to carry this much current using a conventional MOSFET is not possible. Now another parameter is that suppose for our small signal MOSFET we have this much doping, 10 power 17. Now using a one-dimensional analysis, we can calculate the depletion width around the drain when we apply this much voltage. Suppose we in the reverse, when the device is off, suppose we are applying this much voltage, 1200 volt, then there will be a very large depletion region around the drain body junction, and its thickness will be 3.6 micrometer. See, our channel length is only 0.5 micron. So 0.5 micron here and 3.6 micron, that means the drain is reaching through to the source. So this device obviously cannot withstand very high voltages like this. So the limitation of a conventional MOSFET is that the current carrying capability is limited, voltage handling capability is limited. Somehow we have to go for new designs or new device structures. That is what is making difference. Again, this slide showing how power MOSFET can be used as a switch. A simple MOSFET is connected as a switch with a resistive load. So this is the characteristics of the resistor load line. So the green is the cara of the MOSFET. So it will intersect like this. So a lot of operating points can be defined depending on the value of the resistance. Suppose this is the operating point in the on state. You can see that in the on state it is carrying a current I on. The on state there is an voltage drop of V on across the terminals of the switch. So basically we can define a parameter R on, which is the ratio of V on by I on. So in the on state, the main parameter of the switch is on resistance, that is determining the losses. And again, as you said, okay, we want to make everything independent of the size of the device. So we are defining a specific on resistance. It's nothing but on resistance into the active area of the device. It is a specific property, just like our specific gravity, etc. So all the quantities we are defining independent. It's an intensive property. We don't want extensive property. R1 is an extensive property. R1 specific is an intensive property. Now this is the on state. R1 is the parameter. Now come to the off state. Now we can see that V off is the voltage which is coming across the terminals of the switch. It has to withstand up to V off in the reverse state, off state. Now we know that all the devices, BJT, MOSFET, etc., they are having something like avalanche breakdown, all semiconductor devices. So the avalanche breakdown, this shows the avalanche breakdown. For example, VGS is 0, this is in the off state, this is the breakdown. This avalanche breakdown voltage is the parameter which determines the performance of the switch in the off state. So this avalanche breakdown should be greater than the off state. So we conclude that the on resistance and the breakdown voltage are the design parameters of a power MOSFET. But any effort to reduce the on resistance, we have to reduce on resistance as small as possible. But the thing is that our breakdown voltage will also reduce. Or to improve, if we try to improve breakdown voltage, R1 will also improve. So that will degrade our switch. R1 will increase. So that is the trade-off between R1 and PBR. But obviously people are trying to optimize this on resistance as well as breakdown voltage as they can, so that we can design a better power MOSFET. Now, don't bother much about this. This is a one-dimensional formula how the breakdown voltage of a power semiconductor device is related to the doping of the device, ND, drain doping. Now, as I said, we have to go for a special structure. A lot of different types of designs are there. So you can see that there is a literature mentioned like 2 types of power MOSFET structures are reported, mainly 2 types. They are lateral and vertical devices. These classifications is based on the current flow direction. So lateral power MOSFET or for lateral power MOSFETs, the current flow will be lateral through the surface from source to drain. Vertical means the current flow will be vertically downwards or upwards, what we say. So by vertical dimension, I mean this y direction, and lateral dimension x direction. So now onwards, we will concentrate on vertical structure because vertical devices have high voltage withstanding capability as well as high current handling capability. So we will concentrate on vertical structures. Now this vertical structure, which is shown on the previous slide, is similar to the conventional MOSFET structure. It is a simple MOSFET only. We can visualize that vertical structure as derived from the conventional structure, just like some innovative design procedures. So this is a conventional MOSFET. We have a source, N plus source, N plus drain, a P substrate. There's a channel, surface channel. Current direction will be from the drain to source, as shown by the green arrow. We'll have a blue rectangle, which is the, and a red rectangle, which is the gate. Now, as the first innovative design, remove the drain from here. N plus drain along with the contact from the device like this. And the inset I have shown the conventional MOSFET, we don't have a drain here, N plus drain, and the contact that we have removed. Now, take that drain and realize that at the bottom. So this is the drain contact, and this is the drain region. Now onwards, we will call it as N plus substrate. So that is the first step. Drain has been removed and realized at the bottom. Now, as a second step, the P substrate, which was occupying most of the cross-sectional area, now it is restricted to occupy a small contour around the source, like this. And now onwards, we will call it as P well. So drain has been removed, and now the substrate has closed around the source. So everything remains same. Everything except these things remain same. Now, as a third step, what we do is, now in the previous diagram, there was a large area available in the cross section. That area we will convert that to a very lightly doped N minus region, and it will be called N drift layer. So it is just like a continuation of the drain. Drain is here. This is again a part of drain, but it is lightly doped. That is the only difference. Now, one more thing what we will do is that okay, we will extend that gate oxide and gate all over the drain area or N minus drift area. So there is an overlap between the source and, so current can flow from the drain to source if a channel is being developed here. Now the key fabrication step is lying here, how to realize this structure, N plus, then a P well. Now one problem you can notice here is that there is a bias applied to the source, a bias applied to the drain, a bias applied to the gate. But since there is an oxide there, this P well is floating. Okay, there is no connection to the substrate here. That means there will be a lot of body bias effects. To avoid body bias, we have to short circuit the source and P well. So as the last step, another technological change. See, we will give a P plus diffusion here, and its depth will be more than the N plus diffusion, so that this P well and P plus will be connected. And we will short circuit the P well, P plus and source. The contact will be extended. Now body bias is avoided because VBS is 0. So this is same as the vertical structure which we have seen previously. This was the vertical structure which we have seen in the previous slide. So N plus substrate. From the fabrication point of view, if we look into it, we can start with an N plus substrate. We can grow an N minus epitaxial layer. Then we can diffuse a P well first to a window. Diffuse a P well. Then through the same window, perform an N plus diffusion, source diffusion. So this is called a double diffusion in silicon terminology, double diffusion. So the same window we are first diffusing P, then we are diffusing N. Then we can see that depending on the lateral diffusions of the N source dopants as well as P dopants, there will be a P-type region here. This is what acting as the channel. So channel length is from this point to this point. This is a difference in lateral diffusions of source dopants and substrate dopants. So typically in power MOSFETs, this will be of 0.5 micron, like that. Now this is called a half cell of a power MOSFET. It's called a half cell. We can make it a full cell or a unit cell by simply repeating a similar structure. So this is called a unit cell. The cell, I will tell you what we mean by a cell later. You can see that just we have taken a mirror image of it and we have realized this. Now we can think about realizing a unit cell in the other way also. Instead of repeating that portion here, repeat that portion here after taking a flip. See, this is that kind of unit cell. Both are same. Here we are seeing the giving more importance to the area under a unit cell. See, this side again we have repeated on this side. The previous diagram we have given more importance to the area between two adjacent cells. That is the only difference. For fabrication, already I have said how to fabricate this thing. This is the P-type window, which first there will be a P-type diffusion, then there will be an N-type diffusion, and finally I told you that there is to avoid body bias effects, we have to again give a P plus diffusion. That is also shown here in this unit cell. So 3 diffusions actually taking place through the same window. P-type, N-type, then followed by a P plus. Now we have to think about this. Okay, we have realized this kind of structure, whether it is improving the voltage withstanding capability or current handling capability. Because our aim was to increase the voltage withstanding capability as well as current handling capability. For that, first we will see the off state, whether it is improving the voltage withstanding capability. We are applying a reverse bias between the drain and gate. Gate and source short circuited and the drain. We are applying a reverse bias. So I don't know whether I am explaining, it's a unilateral explanation. I don't know whether anybody wants to interact anything. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Very informative, sir.
Yeah, it's. Is there any questions on the chat box or anybody wants to interact?
Sir, there is one question, sir.
Hello?
Sir, there is one question in chat box.
Okay, I will just see it. Avoiding body bias is not clear. That is that question you feel?
No, sir. Above that, there is one question. Above that, just above that.
Sir, a doping concentration increase will reduce the breakdown voltage. If so, why? Okay. Doping concentration increase will reduce the breakdown voltage. That is clear. It will reduce the breakdown voltage. So I will answer this. I will answer this why it is the reason later. This I think I can quickly answer. Avoiding body bias is not clear. Again, going to that slide once again. Because Resika, can you turn on your mic or it's audible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So for in the conventional MOSFET, how we are avoiding the body bias?
So we are creating high doping regions and we are connecting them to VDD or ground.
We are creating high doping concentration regions where
So near the drain and the source.
near the drain and source. We are connecting to the ground. Ground means what? The lowest potential.
If we consider source as our reference, then to the source.
Yeah. Okay. Ultimately, it is something like connecting the source and body together, no?
Right.
Right. Here also we have done the same thing. See if you have seen that. See. Is the slide is visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I told you that this P well is the substrate. Okay. Okay. N plus is the source. So here substrate we have taken through a P plus contact to the source contact. The body and source it is shorted. Or body bias is 0. Is it clear now?
So it is a common contact between body and the source.
It's a common contact between. Our MOSFET is like that. There is no option to apply body bias.
Okay.
Just like a conventional MOSFET.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. The other question I will come later. Okay. Now we were on this slide. Here on this slide. And we were looking how it is improving the off-state breakdown voltage capability as well as increasing the current handling capability. First, we will look on the off-state. So it has to improve the voltage withstanding capability compared to a conventional MOSFET. So for that, we have shorted the source and gate and applied a reverse bias to the drain. So depending on the magnitude of this reverse bias, a depletion region will be developing between the P substrate and the drain, just like a conventional MOSFET. Only thing is that this is a vertical structure. And this depletion region will be preferentially going into the N-type drift layer than the P well. The reason is we know that this is a lightly doped region compared to the substrate that we have already said. So depletion region is more wide in this N-type drift layer. Now, if we go on increasing this reverse bias, this depletion region will grow further and further through the drift layer than this. Okay, so there is no source reach through happening here as in the conventional MOSFET because this is a heavily doped region, the depletion width will be small. Now, this depletion region completely occupy this. And that means this much dimension is available for growth of the depletion layer when we increase reverse bias. Now, what about that dimension? See, normally this is the wafer thickness. Okay. A silicon wafer we are starting with an N plus substrate, then growing epitaxially. So this is the epitaxial layer thickness. The thickness we can decide. So ideally, I am talking about the ideal case where it can go up to the thickness of the wafer. Normally we have 300 micron or 150 micron or 400 or 500 micron wafers thickness. Wafer thickness is of this hundreds of micrometers. So of which we can preserve maybe a 200 micron thickness substrate then this depth may be 10 micron or 5 micron or 20 micron. So that means the remaining 300 or 250 micron is available for growth of the depletion layer. So that means large number of voltage can be withstood across the drift layer. We can withstand very high voltages across the drift layer. If I repeat our previous calculations, in our previous calculation, the substrate doping was 10 power 17. The thickness required was 3.6 micron. Now, if you reduce the substrate doping, normally we won't use such a high substrate doping for power MOSFETs. This will be the doping of the drift layer. That is more important than the substrate. It will be of a 10 power 15 or a 10 power 16 maximum. Okay. So we can withstand large amount of voltage here. So with this 3.6 micron, we found that we can withstand 1200 volt for this substrate doping. Even if we reduce the substrate doping, we can withstand large amount of voltage. So this type of structure, vertical structure, will improve the voltage, reverse voltage handling capability without a breakdown. It will improve the reverse voltage breakdown, reverse voltage handling capability. Now we will go to, so this is a comment. For a typical 1 into 10 power 14 per centimeter cube doping, we can use a one-dimensional analysis. Those details are given in that Baliga's textbook which I have shown in the beginning of the presentation. For this kind of doping, we can achieve breakdown voltage up to 1600 volt with a depletion layer thickness of 150 micrometer. It's a theoretical calculation only. I told you, practically silicon device cannot be used with this much low doping because it will increase the on resistance to any high, and so the current carrying capability of such a device will be very, very small. So normally we won't use. But the theoretical calculation shows that if 150 micron depletion layer growth is allowed, we can achieve up to 1600 volt breakdown. Now coming to the on state, whether it will improve the current handling capability. It's already 11 o'clock. Hello, Bindu. Hello, Gopi Krishna.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, normally you want to allow some break or something, no?
Sir, it's up to you. Like if at all session goes long, it will be better to take a 5 to 10 minutes break.
Okay, I think a few more slides, 2-3 slides I will explain, and after that we can take a break. Okay. Yeah. So now we are inquiring whether this kind of connection has improved the current handling capability of the device in the on state. So for that, we have to apply a gate voltage so that a surface channel is developed. Gate voltage should be more than the threshold voltage. Source is a common terminal, and we have to apply a positive voltage to the drain. So gate voltage should be greater than threshold voltage, and drain voltage should be less. So now we can see that current flow lines indicated by the green arrows. They are spreading. They are spreading here, going to the surface channel here. This portion also will be inverted. There's an inversion layer. So they are flowing to the source. So current is flowing vertically upwards. That is why it is called a vertical structure. So from this slide onwards, we will give the slide title as VD MOSFET, vertically diffused MOSFETs. It's a diffused MOSFET because of this fabrication process, and the current flow is vertical. So we have V. So VD, it is called a VD MOSFET. Silicon power MOSFET is called a VD MOSFET, vertically diffused silicon power MOSFET. Now we can see that, okay, the current carrying capability is depending on W by L. So we see that it's a W of this device we haven't increased. So its current carrying capability is not increasing. It is same as that of the conventional MOSFET. So we have to do something to improve the current carrying capability. So this is how that is achieved. So this is the vertical structure, half cell, which I have told you earlier. We are repeating that half cell in 1 dimensions. So this diagram shows 4 times I have repeated the thing. Now connect all these devices in parallel. So 4 half cells connected in parallel. Because there is not these thermal runaway effects are not present in MOSFETs compared to BJT, so we can connect the devices in parallel, no problem. So 4 half cells connected in parallel means current carrying capability is increasing 4-fold. Now we can think of connecting, say, 10,000 half cells or 20,000 half cells in parallel, so that the current carrying capability is taken to the required level of 60 amperes or any kind of amperage can connect in parallel. That is the innovation in power MOSFET, which will improve the current carrying capability. Now that is called that kind of connection is called a linear cell. It's called a linear cell MOSFET. This is the basic unit cell. This is the cross section. This is the corresponding top view of the unit cell. So cells, maybe thousands of cells like this, thousands or 10,000s or lakhs of these kind of cells can be connected in parallel to get very high current carrying capability. So thus we can improve the current carrying capability as well as voltage handling capability. So I think we can stop here, take a 5 minutes break. Okay. Is there any questions other than that?
Hello.
Hello.
Sir, this is Rasika Dause.
Yeah.
Sir, I have a question in this linear cell. If we are using 10,000s or lakhs of devices together in parallel, what will be the size of the complete chip?
Yeah, basically
Layouting. I'm talking about layouting these transistors.
Yeah, what we will see. So channel length already I said it is around 0.5 micron.
Yes, sir.
Okay. For a conventional MOSFET, what is the width of the cell?
Around 2.5 times.
5 times. W by L ratio 5. Okay. Now, suppose we are connecting 1,000 cells in parallel. Okay. So their source and gate terminals. Source and gate terminals are on the top of the device and the drain is on the bottom. So there is no problem with the drain interconnection because it's a common metallization, common backside metallization.
Right.
Okay. On the top, we have 2 contacts. One is gate, the other one is source. So we have to do a gate metallization. Okay. First. Okay. Then we have to do some sort of lithography and all. Then we have to have a source metallization, which will be separated from this gate metallization by a dielectric layer. Okay.
So you mean vertically we have to start?
Vertically we have to start. The metallization, one metallization is on the top of the other with a
insulation in between.
With a dielectric layer in between. And in cases where we have to short circuit the gate and source. Okay. So actually I think this kind of connections, we have to separately take out the gate connection from the device because in the bottom metallization now. Then we have to take it out and then we have to short it. Okay. Yeah, that fabrication details, I think. Okay, Balika gives those fabrication details, but a little bit more. That is, it's a tricky kind of thing. We are taking in a 3rd dimension, the gate contact. Okay.
Okay,
13.
sir. That is
Yeah.
way to control the aspect ratio.
Yeah. Aspect ratio.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir, and what material is used for drain? Drain is common, so we have to worry about the power density or current density for the drain electrode.
Yeah. So material is silicon only. We can use as I said silicon carbide or gallium nitride or whatever it is.
No,
Okay.
sir, for
I
contact.
am.
For contact.
So for drain also it is heavily doped silicon.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in one of the literature I was studying that they told that unit cell topology, the hexagon is the best one.
Unit cell topology. Can you repeat?
Hexagon
Yeah, I am. I am.
topology is
I
the
am.
best.
I am coming into it after the break.
Okay.
I will come into
Okay,
it.
okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I think no more questions as
Yeah.
of now,
Shall
sir.
I take
We can take
2 minutes break?
5 minutes break.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. 5 minutes. We'll take a break.
Yeah.
After that, we'll come back. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You can start the session, sir.
Hello? Yeah.
Sir, you can start the session.
My slides are audible, visible now.
Yes, sir.
So it's in slideshow mode? No.
No, sir. No.
Okay. Now it
Yeah.
is in slideshow mode. Okay.
Now it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Welcome back. We were telling about the linear cell. Now we have seen that now the voltage withstanding capability of the structure is improved, as well as current carrying capability we can improve by parallelly connecting a large number of cells. Now the question is about, is the linear cell is the only option, because we have to utilize the silicon wafer area to the maximum. So for that, literature has suggested a lot of cell geometries other than linear cell. So one of them is a square cell. It's very popular. The other one is a hexagonal cell, VD MOSFET, as well as a square cell. So in our talk, we will restrict our discussion to square cell devices. The reason is that, these analytical models which are available in literature and books, everything, it is for square cells. Hexagonal cells models are there, but they are not so popular. So that is why we are going to restrict our discussion to square cells. The other thing is that, that is applicable to hexagonal cells also. The cross section is similar to that of the linear cell. So I will take the laser pointer. So this is a top view of the one cell, and this is the cross section. Cross section is similar to that of a linear cell. Top view means on the back side there is a drain substrate. Now we are epitaxially growing an N- drift layer in the device. Then we will open a window like this. Then through the entire window we have a P plus diffusion. Then through the same window we have N plus. So actually this is maybe this determines the window size, N plus. So two diffusions, one P and one N. That difference in lateral diffusion will form the channel in the square shape. And finally we will have that P plus doping to avoid body bias effects. So this is a square cell VD MOSFET. Here the wafer area utilization is better than the linear cell structure. That is why nowadays this linear cell structure is not so popular. Just for research purpose only, people will sometimes manufacture. Now we can repeat these square cells in 2 dimensions like this. Individual square. This is one square. This is one square. This is one square like this. And I have marked this S as the side of the square. Or this is a channel length for us. 4 times S is the channel length of a unit cell, average channel length. Then this A is the difference or distance between 2 adjacent square cells. Normally in this drawing is not so perfect. That is why this A and this A will be same everywhere. And this is a P. Now this shows in a miniature scale how these square cells are made in a square array. So this is called a square cell, square array design. As cells are square, then this array is also square. So all these cells, when connected in parallel, they will give a very large current carrying capability. Now there is another thing, like as somebody said, we have the hexagonal cell, hexagonal array. Here also one side we can take it as S. So 6S will be there. And this is the distance between 2 adjacent hexagonal cells. So HexFET, it will be called a HexFET, hexagonal cell. Now, for all these kind of devices, the cross section will be same. Cross section will be same, irrespective of whether it's linear, square, or hexagonal. So, when the device is in the on state, we know that current will be flowing from the drain through the drift layer, through the top of this N minus layer, through the channel to the source, and finally to the source contact. So current flow path will be like this. So the total on resistance will be determined by the path of this geometry. Now for the easiness of analysis, what we will do is we will split up all these things to different on resistance components. Like maybe if we start from the drain contact, we will have drain contact resistance, this resistance of this N plus layer, then resistance of this N minus drift layer, and the resistance offered by this top portion, this resistance as well as channel resistance, then source resistance, source contact resistance, etc. Of this, we know that this contact resistances and this N plus region resistance are very low. So we normally won't consider them in design much. The significant component of resistances are this drift layer resistance RD. Then this is called a JFET resistance, this red resistance, because the space between two adjacent cells will behave as a JFET. I will show you later. Then this is called an accumulation layer resistance, because this layer is basically accumulating. If you are applying a positive voltage to the gate, this is an N layer, so they are accumulating with the majority carriers. And this is the channel resistance as usual in our MOSFET. The sum of all these resistances will be the on resistance. So we have models. We have models in literatures for calculating each of these resistance components and for the design of the cell like that. Square cell also the same thing. Same cross section, so same kind of resistances. So this is one such model available for calculating the channel resistance and all. And the details of the derivation of this model and all given in this slide, in this paper. Those who are interested, they can go to that. It's a 1984 paper from Cheming. Now, coming to the second component of resistance, I told you accumulation layer resistance. So, this is the accumulation region, the yellow cross. This is the accumulation region in the top view. We are removing the gate contact and everything. Gate contact to see the accumulation region. So, 4 adjacent square cells are here. Between the square cells, it is the accumulation region. The top view, it will appear like this. Sorry, in the cross section, it will appear like this. In the top view, it will appear like this, that accumulation layer. This resistance is slightly difficult to model, but we have models available for that also. Again, the same paper gives that model for that accumulation layer resistance. Now coming to the third resistance, that is the JFET region. So below the accumulation region, this is the accumulation region. Below the accumulation region, if we look at further into the distance spacing between two adjacent half cells, we can see that this is a JFET. See, there's an N channel around this P-type substrates are there, just like a JFET. So this portion, the resistance can be the channel resistance of a JFET. Again, this is a cross. It's a cross. It's like a salmon red cross. So this is the model for that, where Xj is the junction depth. Xj is the junction depth. And the W naught is the depletion layer. Here, this is the W naught. The same paper will give the model. Then coming to the drift layer resistance. Drift layer resistance is an important component. So this is a resistance of the N-type drift layer. Here actually we can divide that drift layer into two regions. This is the first region, this is the second region. This shows how current is spreading into the drift layer. Typically 2-3 flow lines I have shown. Current is spreading here. So the resistance of this portion is slightly higher than the one-dimensional resistance, which can be calculated for the entire drift line. Because current is spreading, it has to spread to the drain contact like this. Here there is no current spreading, so we can use the one-dimensional formula for calculating this portion. So total drift layer resistance is the sum of these two. The total drift layer resistance is spreading resistance plus one-dimensional resistance. This is the spreading resistance, this is the one-dimensional component of that. So using these models, we can calculate the total on resistance of the device. So I have just summarized the models. So far, we were discussing the on-state operation of the device. We have seen that current carrying capability can be improved by cellular structure, cellular design, of which hexagonal square cell array pattern, they are more popular. And there are resistances associated with the current flow path. Those can be divided into various components for easiness of analysis, and they can be used for designing the power MOSFET. Now coming to the off-state operation. That is off-state is also equivalently important, because in the off-state the switch has to withstand the voltage. This was the top view of the square array pattern which we have seen previously. Here, what we have to note is that there are a lot of cells are there. Many of those cells are within the bulk of interior of the device. Each of these cells have nearest neighbors. They have cells sitting around it. But coming to the edge of the device, they don't have any neighbors here. So this is an important factor. Now, first we will consider a cell which is in the interior of the device or bulk of the device, which have nearby cells. So these are two types of two cells of that type. Only the half cell portion is shown of the adjacent cells, and we are giving importance to the area between two adjacent cells. This is in the within the interior of the device. We are connecting them in the off state. Reverse bias. We are applying a reverse bias to the drain, source and gate terminals of nearby cells are short circuited. Now these blue curves, blue dashed lines shows the depletion boundaries of the individual cell. For this cell, this is the depletion boundary in the well, and this is the depletion boundary in the drift layer. For this cell, this is the depletion boundary in the well, this is the depletion boundary in the drift layer. For a given reverse bias. Now we can see that within the drift layer, these boundaries will merge each other, and the net depletion layer will look like this. See here, it's just like a diode. It's a plane parallel diode. The depletion boundary is a plane or a straight line in 2 dimensions, or a plane in 3 dimensions. It's just like now, if you see these two regions are short circuited, so it is just like a P-N minus N plus diode. In the off state, a unit cell in the bulk of the device will behave as a P-N minus N plus diode. That is the point which we have to note there. Now, if that is the case, we can approximate that unit cell within the bulk as P-N minus N plus diode. This light orange arrows shows the depletion electric field lines originating from the N minus side of the depletion layer to the P side. And even if we take any cross section in this along the volume of the device, we see that there is no electric field crowding. Everywhere the electric field strength will be uniform. That means the electric field crowding is avoided, because remember that avalanche breakdown voltage is the main breakdown mechanism in diodes or any semiconductor device where there are PN junctions. And wherever electric field crowding is there, the potential or the electric field in that region will increase rapidly and exceed the critical electric field of breakdown. So that region is more prone to breakdown. But here there is no electric field crowding. That means all the regions are equally prone to breakdown. And the breakdown voltage is given by this one-dimensional equation. This is the ideal breakdown voltage of a plain parallel diode. We can calculate the plain parallel diode depending on the doping of this region. This is valid only when there is no electric field crowding. Now come to the edge of the device. The edge of the device is zoomed. See, this is the edge cell. There are no nearest adjacent cells to name. Protect it or share its depletion boundaries. Now see that if we zoom that region, we can see that for the edge cell, there is no nearby half cell to share the depletion region, or that so-called merging of depletion region does not happen in the N- drift layer. So what happens is that this kind of a situation, there is a curvature for the depletion layer boundary. So there will be crowding in regions like this. In this green circle, there will be electric field crowding. That means electric field, even though they are low here, the electric field is going to increase rapidly here and exceed the critical electric field of breakdown. That means the device now it will break down at a lower voltage compared to the one-dimensional formula which was shown earlier. This is the one-dimensional formula. This is the ideal breakdown voltage. Now we cannot achieve this much breakdown voltage with this structure, this kind of structure. But these kind of cells are situating at the edges of the device. So ultimately the breakdown voltage of the device will be much less than this predicted by the one-dimensional formula. Now some text I have written, something like the field crowding should be avoided or reduced to increase the breakdown voltage to that of the plain parallel value. Or the periphery of the device should be modified by proper edge termination. Now we have different types of edge termination techniques. The literature has suggested a lot of ways to reduce this field crowding. And this is the most attractive one, most popular one, and historically one of the first technique which was evolved, floating field rings. Most of you may have heard of that. Here the main attraction of that is its fabrication is very simple. But main problem with that is its design optimization is very difficult. That's a disadvantage. This is how the device will look like. These are the cells. Now we are protecting those edges of the device by using edge termination. This is called the edge termination structure. Each of this rectangle, approximate rectangle, corresponds to a heavily doped p-type region. This is one p-type floating field ring. This is another p-type floating field ring. This is another one. This is another. 4 floating field rings are diffused. P-type, heavily doped p-type strings are diffused around the active area of the device. Now, this is a diagram which will zoom the edge of the device. This is the half cell at the edge. And this is the first floating field ring. This is second one, this is third one, this is the fourth one. Now, this is the net depletion boundary in the N+ layer. Now we can see that if these were absent, there will be a lot of curvatures. Now the curvature has slowly reduced. That means each of this floating field ring will share some electric field of the main junction here. So subsequently, the electric field will be shared within the depletion region within each of these floating field rings. So the electric field crowding in the entire device will be much less than the case where floating field rings were absent. Now, the breakdown voltage will depend upon the number of floating field rings we use, the spacing between the main junction and the floating field ring. So it is more clear in the previous diagram. S1 is the spacing between the main junction and the floating field ring. Sn is the ring to ring spacing. Then there will be a depth for the ring. There will be a width for the ring. All these are design parameters. While designing these floating field rings, we have to consider all these simultaneously. So we can design an N-ring floating field ring structure to improve the breakdown voltage to the plane parallel value and reduce the field crowding to minimum. So see, for an N floating field ring, we can have depletion layer boundaries like this. So far, any questions or anything? Hello? Hello?
Sir, it is audible, sir.
Is there any questions in the chat box?
No, sir. As of now, no questions.
Okay. So we will continue.
Okay, sir.
So finally, this is the floating field ring edge termination structure. So I have marked a parameter LE here. LE is the length of the edge termination structure in one dimension. Actually, in the device, it will come as an area. So this is a very critical design parameter. This is going to determine how much space the edge termination structure will be occupying out of the total device area. Now, a typical simulation, we can design this. Normally, how people will fabricate this is along with the P-well diffusion. I told you this floating field rings can be manufactured along with the P-well diffusion. But before designing that floating field ring structure, we will perform a larger number of simulation steps to see how the breakdown voltage can be improved using simulation. So first what we will do is we will first simulate without any edge termination structure, and we will see how much will be the breakdown voltage. For example, it's a typical example only. For a particular structure, we have simulated a simulation generated with the one of the TCAD simulator available with us. We have simulated the structure without any edge termination. We found that for a 5 kV device, so for a plane parallel device, it was breakdown voltage was around 5 kilovolts, 5000 volts. Without any edge termination structure, the breakdown voltage was only 787 volt. And we see that this is the area where that yellow or bright red spot, this is the area where maximum electric field crowding occurs. And the structure breaks down here. This is basically the electric field contour of the device. So basically you can see that the maximum breakdown, maximum electric field is 3.5 into 10 power 6. It's around 3 megavolts. Obviously it is not silicon. The material is not silicon. That is why it is 3.5 megavolts. For silicon, it will be the critical electric field of breakdown will be how much? For silicon, it will be around 300 kilovolts only. This is 10 times higher than that. It is because the material is not silicon, it is silicon carbide. So a simulation without any edge termination structure can yield 787 volt. Now a simulation with the one floating field ring. How the breakdown voltage will be improved. So this spacing, this S1 has to be adjusted for maximum improvement in the breakdown voltage. After manufacturing that floating field ring, we have to adjust this spacing. So for optimal spacing, the breakdown voltage was improved to 1284 volts. Now we can see that the breakdown happens at the edge of the half cell as well as the first floating field ring. Both are simultaneous breaking down. Now if we continue with the two floating field rings, both the spacing S1 and S2 has to be optimized. Again, this is the simulation which showed 1520 volts. So this shows that we have to use a very large number of floating field rings to improve the breakdown voltage to 5000 volt. So in each case, suppose we are simulating with 3 floating field rings or 4 floating field rings. We are simulating with 3, there will be 3 spacing parameters, S1, S2, S3 to optimize. The 10 floating field rings are required, there will be 10 parameters. Only the spacing parameters, not the ring length or ring width or ring depth. So that is the kind of parameters, number of parameters which have to be optimized. And we can spot a lot of designs in literature, recent designs in 2017, 18, 19, etc. Silicon carbide designs where the number of floating field rings is 30, 35, 40, 50 like that. So that is the complexity in the design of these floating field rings, even though the fabrication is easy. And there are different other different kinds of edge termination like junction termination extension, field plate, etc. So this is all what I wanted to share with you. So I'm happy to answer any questions if I can. Otherwise, at least I can give you the source where you can find the answer. If any questions are there, you can please.
Sir, there is one question in chat box, sir.
Yeah.
How we will determine the critical electric field of a given power device?
Yeah, critical electric field of a given power device, as far as I know, it's a material parameter. So, so it is not something which we will design or anything. So simply measuring it or determining it, maybe, okay, we can observe the breakdown voltage of the device. We can observe the breakdown voltage of the device. And from other material parameters and other things, because actually there is a relation between the critical electric field and the breakdown voltage. We can determine that. Other than that, I think we cannot measure it. It's a material parameter. We cannot design it or we can't design for it.
Sir, is it given in the data sheet? Critical electric.
Yeah, critical electric field is a material parameter, as I told you. Data sheets will give the device parameters. What is the breakdown voltage? What is the current? What is the threshold voltage and all these things. For example, for silicon, what is the critical electric field strength of breakdown? Avalanche breakdown?
Okay,
it is 300 kV. For any device made with silicon, it is 300 kV only. So normally that is why data sheets does not specify. For silicon carbide, it is 3 megavolts per centimeter. 3 megavolts per centimeter.
Sir, for silicon?
Silicon 300 kilovolts.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Kilovolts per centimeter. And the one question, I don't know who has raised it. Why the breakdown voltage is lower for higher doping? That was the question raised by that person. Who has asked it?
Sir.
He's online.
Yeah,
She's online.
it is me, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
One question I will ask you.
Yes.
Okay. On a very dry summer day,
Okay.
suppose there is a lightning flash. Okay.
Yeah.
On a very dry summer day, there is a lightning flash.
Okay.
Okay. Then suppose there is a lightning flash during a very humid, rainy day.
Okay. Okay.
On which of these two cases the voltage involved in that lightning process will be high? That is, the clouds has to acquire more potential or more charge.
Probably in more dust, or if the kind of more particles are there due to that.
Yeah, that is ultimately it will depend on the conductivity.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's the conductivity of the air. So that
Okay.
will be obviously conductivity will be higher during when it is humid and the dust particles and all those kinds are there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Similarly, here also in the off state, it has to support large amount of voltage across its depletion region.
Okay. Okay. Sir.
So this thickness of the depletion region matters. Okay. When the diode is heavily doped, if both sides of the PN junction is heavily doped, what about the thickness of the depletion region?
Depletion. Okay, so it will be
very small
short.
or very small?
Very small.
Okay. So, but when it is lightly doped, the depletion region is very large.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So that, so from that we can intuitively think, we can arrive at the conclusion that when the doping is higher, breakdown voltage will be lower.
Lower.
Actually, we have to understand those avalanche breakdown phenomenon and everything in detail to have an analytical answer for that. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think there are no doubts. We can wind up, or we can.
In chat box, there are some doubts.
Okay, I will see. I will be determined. Okay. Is there any gate tunneling in this device? Okay. Obviously, in any gate, there will be tunneling. Mr. Raj Shah is asking. There will be gate tunneling, but that is part of the leakage current in the device. Anyway, in the on state, the tunneling current will be very negligible. Tunneling will be there because of the high electric field. I am telling it the gate leakage current, not particularly telling about that tunneling. Now, Krishna Priya, yes. How does the operating frequency affect the power rating? See, power MOSFET is used as a switch. Krishna Priya? Hello? Is Krishna Priya there?
Hello, sir.
Krishna Priya? You can hear now. Your doubt is, how does the operating frequency affect the power rating? So basically, this power MOSFET is used as a switch in electrical circuits to control power, no?
Yes.
Okay. If the operating frequency of the switch is high, the switching frequency is high, that power will be
dynamic losses will be the dynamic.
A dynamic power rating will be larger. Yeah. Is it okay?
But sir, in one of the earlier slides that you have shown initially, as per the operating frequency, the power rating was shown to be decreasing actually. So
power rating, that is mainly it was like those where I didn't include the dynamic or static or anything separately. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, that is the thing. Dynamic power rating will be more.
Okay.
Yeah. Then Next, can you elaborate on the scope of research? Yeah, Jessica, thou say. Jessica?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you were asking about the scope of research in power semiconductor devices.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a lot of scope. Obviously, there's a lot of scope, especially because nowadays people are working in wide bandgap semiconductor devices like silicon carbide, gallium nitride. I also work. Even in India, there are few people who are working in silicon carbide, but it is not a different material than silicon.
Right.
Work in silicon carbide, there is no need of any additional knowledge other than what we have done in semiconductor devices. Okay.
Okay.
Worldwide also, outside India also, there are a large number of groups which are working in semiconductors. You can find out using an internet search or anything. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Then
I think that's it, sir.
pardon?
He's asking something.
Yeah.
Sir, apart from Baliga, which other book can we refer?
Apart from Baliga, which other book? Baliga, mainly there are two editions. Baliga, one is power semiconductor devices. There is one more book from Baliga that is specifically for silicon carbide. I don't know. I'm not remembering books which will explain these gallium nitride devices and all.
Okay.
Yeah, gallium nitride devices you can make net search and all. Baliga, that silicon carbide book is very good. One book is there. Two books are there for Baliga. One is for general power semiconductor devices, which refers to both silicon and silicon carbide. Then there is a book specifically for silicon carbide. Okay, there's a lot of books are available. You can make an internet search. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Hello, sir. This
Hello?
is Jessica again.
Yeah.
So if we want to simulate this power MOSFET in TCAD, which model, physical model, should we use? Is drip diffusion okay, or we have to go for hydrodynamic or something?
Yeah, basically, when we simulate power devices, I think as far as the on state of the device is concerned, the usual models which you use for simulating our small signal MOSFETs, all those models are to be included. That is the doping dependency mobility model, that field dependency mobility model, the saturation model, recombination models, all those has to be included.
Okay.
And when you are simulating that off state, that most important model which you have to include is a breakdown impact ionization model. Okay. Okay. Impact ionization models, depending on the T card which you use.
For all TCAD things don't have this model.
You are from which NIT? SP, NIT, SP?
Surat. Sardar
Vallabhbhai Patel. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. It didn't come to my mind quickly. Okay. Which T card do you have?
Yeah, sir, we have Centaurus.
Centaurus. In Centaurus, we have, I think, one overstated model. There are a lot of impact ionization models there. I have worked with both Centaurus and Atlas.
Okay.
Both we have lot of impact ionization models are there. That should be there. Okay. And you have to adjust their parameters. Basically, you have to calibrate your simulator before doing your breakdown simulations. Of course, for silicon and all your default models, default values you can use. But if you are working on silicon carbide and other thing, it is important that you calibrate your model. Adjust those parameters from measured data available in the literature and all. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Sir, I hope there are no more questions from the audience.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think we can wind up now.
Yes, sir. I'll give you vote of thanks. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our request to be one of the resource persons for this FTP. It was a thought-provoking and interesting address. Even though the main focus of this FTP is to learn the concepts about future nanoelectronics and sensors, the audience should know the difference between nanoscale devices and power MOSFET to understand the impact of different physical parameters and materials over there. We hope that some of the audience definitely find the problem statements from their research work, for their research work from this talk. Once again, thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Udishna, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So all the audience, please come to online by 2:30. Thank you.